So let's take a few minutes and look at the effects of abuse in previous experiences, especially in childhood, how it affects relationships, and some of the issues involved with abuse. I'd like to create a scenario to kind of help us look at this at kind of a little bit deeper level. Picture in your mind a 4-year-old little child. Her mother is telling her to go clean her room, and she doesn't want to clean her room, and she's practicing her independence. And she says something like this. I hope this sounds a little bit like a 3 or 4-year-old. No, I don't want to. Mother takes her by the hand, marches her into the bedroom. Now, sweetheart, you made this mess with these toys. You've got to learn to clean them up. Now, you get on that side of the bed, I'll get on this side of the bed. We have to make your bed. You have to do this every day. Mother is loving and nurturing, but firm, and teaches her daughter to clean her room. Now, picture in your mind a few years later, this child is now 13 years old. 13 is a difficult age, becoming much more independent. It's hard to make a 13-year-old clean the room. They say it differently, something like this maybe. No, I don't want to. Still some submission in the voice, but not very much. A few years later, the child is now 18 years old, and they say it differently. I'll do it in a minute, Mom. Hours later, Mother, I said I would do it. Just get off my back. I'll get it done. And weeks later, Mother, do you have to nag me all the time? Please, I'll get it done. Get off my back. And the child never gets the room clean. It's very hard to make an 18-year-old clean their room. In most cases, an 18-year-old is more powerful than the parent, and they can take this sweet, loving, caring feeling away from the parent and break their hearts and make it hurt. Now picture in your mind a few years later, this 18-year-old is now a young adult parent. Gone through the experience of breaking their parent's heart because the parents can't control them any longer, because now they can feel their independence because they're an adult and they like that independent, me in control feeling. The 18-year-old is now a young adult parent and has a 4-year-old child, teaching the 4-year-old to clean their rooms and to be responsible. And the 4-year-old practices their independence and says something like this, no, I don't want to. Now, it doesn't compute up here at a conscious, logical level, but deep down inside in the guts, it tears and pulls and festers. It's an ugly, horrible feeling because something deep inside knows this child is going to grow up and become more powerful than I am. And I will lose control, and I will not be able to make this child behave the way I want them to behave. Something deep inside the guts says, don't let that happen. Teach this child right now while they're very young and very vulnerable that I am more powerful than you are, and I will always be more powerful, and you can never grow up and become more powerful than I am. Now, how do you do that? You do it by something called abuse. You teach that child while they're still very young and very vulnerable, or sometimes when they're still very young in a new relationship, such as marrying somebody who's very young, like 17, 18, 19 years old, being very powerful with them. You teach them that I'm in control and I will always be in control, and you can never be more powerful than I am. The way you do that is you teach them that when they practice their independence, to teach them to associate terrible, terrible pain with that independence. The way you do that is called abuse. So when they practice their independence, no, I don't want to. You slap that child hard. You don't lovingly, firmly take them by the hand and march them into the bedroom. You drag them by the ear or by the hair, and it hurts. You kick them hard on the way into that bedroom, and you say very powerful tones of voice, don't you ever talk to me that way. And you use very powerful tones of voice. And you say things like, I hate you. I hate the day you were born. You're the worst thing that's ever happened to me. You're terrible, awful. And you teach that child to be tormented and scared and frightened of their independence. Because every time they practice their independence, it has to hurt real bad. That's called verbal abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. Now, from my observations, something even more devastating is called neglect, abandonment. And the most powerful is called sexual abuse. The very essence of who I am, the most private aspect of who I am as a person, is taken away by somebody who's very powerful at a time when the child is very vulnerable. Even adults can have that taken away from them, and it is devastating to them, because even the most private aspect of who I am as a person can be taken away. Now, the politically correct term for this is called codependence. And I'm going to put my hand right here to represent this place called codependence. But I'm going to use a different term that I find is a little easier to comprehend and understand. I'm going to use the term slavery. Slavery means I don't belong to me. I belong to a very powerful person called a slave master. Codependence, I find sometimes is a little bit hard to comprehend and understand what that really means. But slavery is very simple. I don't belong to me. I belong to a very powerful person called a slave master. I don't get to own. I don't want to clean my room. That belongs to my slave master. I don't get to own, can I go to the grocery store with you, Daddy? That doesn't belong to me. Can I go to my friend's house? That doesn't belong to me. If I ask for things like that, then I'm practicing my independence. And my slave master is going to have to teach me to be very passive and submissive, and to stay over here in this passive, submissive place. As long as I stay here, life can be quite tolerable. It's when I come over here and try to practice my independence that life becomes impossible. Life becomes horrible and painful, and neglect and abuse. As long as I stay here, I might grow up and become an adult. When I come over here, hope of growing up and becoming an adult is taken away from me because I might die. Or somebody that I love will die. Something horrible is going to happen to me. I might become an orphan because my abuser might kill my parents. It's terrifying. It's frightening. As long as I stay over here in this very passive place, then I can function, and life is tolerable. Coming over here is where life is intolerable. I will not be able to survive and function. I learn staying over here is where I have a chance of life. There are 4 things that happen with slavery. 4 issues of slavery that are important to understand. The first issue of slavery is that I learn that that love is very confusing. It becomes bewildering to me. True love, meaningful love, is when I was a child and I fell and bumped my knee. This wonderful, caring woman or father or man picked me up, coddled me, and loved me. They could feel the pain inside of me. The pain when I bumped my knee didn't hurt for just a few seconds, but something jarred me and scared me and felt unsafe. And this person who was coddling me could feel it, and taught me in the process that there's something so precious and beautiful and wonderful inside of me, that this person loves me and cares about my happiness. And I could feel that inside of me and became aware of who I am. And it became me. This is who I am. I own it. And this person gave it to me in my young childhood and was nurtured throughout my childhood, not just when I bumped my knee, but every day, many, many times during the day, until I became an adult, until I found somebody else that came into my life who continued to nurture that experience and helped me know who I am and helped me feel this very precious sense of me as a person. With slavery, you never allow a person to feel that sense of who they are as somebody precious and special and wonderful. That has to be taken away to push them over into this slavery place where they become very passive and very easy to raise because they better be perfect or it's going to hurt real bad. And they become very responsive and they behave perfectly because it can be painful if they don't. It's easy to raise a slave. It's hard to raise a child. You can be independent. So I learned to stay over here and be passive. Then love becomes confusing. I have heard some of my clients, for example, describe love when they had slavery issues. One, for example, said something like this to me. My father's slave master would rape and beat my sister, but he didn't rape and beat me. He loved me the most. Now, what does that mean? It means my sister would fight to find her independence, and he would beat her and rape her, trying to force her into submission to keep her over here into this slavery place. But with me, I just naturally went over here into this submissive place. And he never had to do those awful behaviors towards me because I just automatically went to that slavery place of submission and passive behavior. Her sister was more healthy than she was because her concept of love was very confused. Another client of mine said something like this: my slave master husband beat me really bad today. Said he was going to leave me. He would never love me again. But he didn't leave me. He truly loves me because he stayed. Looking from the outside, anybody else would say, wait a minute, this guy beat you? Leave the jerk. Don't have anything to do with him. But you see, when there's a problem with slavery, it's hard to feel anything inside of me that feels like I'm desirable, that there's something about me that could be wanted. And so it feels like if my slave master leaves me, I will be devoid of love for the rest of my life. I will never have love again. That's why she said, but he didn't leave me. He truly loves me. She was holding on to the only thing, the only source that she could feel where she could have love was with her slave master. Quite often that's the pattern, and the concept of love becomes very confusing and bewildering. The second issue of slavery. Now, I grew up in this horrible, awful environment. Very painful. It feels like I will not grow up. But I finally grow up and I leave that awful environment and I get a job. It feels like I'm going to be free of this abuse and this awful experience. Finally going to be liberated from this bad environment. I get a job and my boss could be really wonderful and constantly praise me for my work, but it always feels like I'm going to be fired because I can't feel anything inside of me that feels like I'm desirable or attractive or good. Even though I work harder than anybody else in this company, it always feels like I'm on the verge of being fired. I have two bosses. One day my boss, Joe, wants me to do this job over here. My other boss, Bill, wants me to do this job over here. That's impossible. I can't do both jobs at the same time. Growing up, I had to do the impossible. I had to get my room cleaned, and I had to study for my test. If I didn't get both done, I would be beaten, or have some horrible, horrible consequence. So I learned to do the impossible. I did both. Now I'm in a situation where I know I'm supposed to do the impossible. I have to do this job and this job at the same time, but I can't. That is truly impossible. There's no way I can do it. I have to go talk to my boss. I have to explain to them that they've asked me to do two things at the same time, and I can't. Now, a normal person who doesn't have slavery issues, it's not a big deal. I'm going to go to Bill and say, Bill, you asked me to do this job over here, and Joe wants me to do this job over here at the same time, and I'm sorry, I can't do both at the same time. You see, there's an expectation. You can't ask me to do the impossible. With slavery issues, you can ask me to do the impossible, and I better find a way to do it. But a person who has this sense of themselves as somebody that has dignity and respect and feels good about themselves, obviously you can't expect me to do both at the same time. So I'm just going to simply bring that to Bill's attention, and he's going to go talk to Joe, and I'll get my assignment, and I'll do what I'm supposed to do, and everything's just fine. But with a person with slavery issues, you just can't do that. You can't go talk to Bill as though I count. Bill wouldn't even hear me anyway. It doesn't feel like anybody would hear my voice. If I'm going to be heard, and in order to find the courage to be able to go and talk to Bill, I have to come over here, and to come over here, I have to become very, very intense. How can you ask me to do that job, and Joe wants me to do that? I can't do both at the same time. How can you ask me to do that? Now I become very, very aggressive. That's called passive, aggressive behavior. That's the pattern with slavery, is passive aggressive behaviors. Passive if I can possibly stay in that passive place. But when you force me out of there and I have to come over here, then I have to be aggressive, or it feels like you won't hear my voice, I won't count. And I've got to find the courage to be able to come over here and talk to you, and I have to do that. I have to be aggressive to feel that power inside of me as though I'm a real person. I'm emphasizing the passive side of passive-aggressive behavior. For many people who have slavery issues, this is death. I cannot survive here. I have to survive over here. In order to stay here, this is never a strong steel table, the top of a flat mountain. This is an icy, slippery place. It takes all of my energy, all of my focus, all of my concentration to be able to stay here and feel my sense of me as a person. It's exhausting. It's exhausting for the person who's trying to maintain their independence and to feel their balance and to feel the strength of themselves as a person. It's exhausting to them. It's exhausting to be around them because they're such intense people. They get angry easily. They use intense levels of anger. They use intense levels of aloofness, intense levels of superiority and martyr. It's not passive little behaviors. They are intense levels. In order to stay here, they have to be aggressive. And it's hard to be around them because of the aggressiveness of their nature. That's the second issue of slavery. The third issue of slavery. So I grow up. I finally feel like I'm going to leave that awful, horrible environment. And this wonderful person comes into my life and says, come up here and let's be in love. Let's share intimacy with each other. I'm going to be so happy. And this person is really good to me. But this person, she leaves her peanut butter on the drain board every day. I put it away and she leaves it out, and I put it away and she leaves it out. After a while, I just feel like I'm such a slave, and I want her to put her own peanut butter away, and I finally find the courage inside of me, and I finally tell her, can't you please put your own peanut butter away? And she goes, all right. She says, all right, and this horrible, scary feeling sweeps over me. Because why does she stay with me? I can't feel anything inside of me that feels like I'm attractive or desirable or wanted. Why does she stay with me? Because I put her peanut butter away. If I stop putting her peanut butter away, it feels like she'll leave me. This scary, frightening feeling sweeps over me, and what I say to her is, oh, I'm sorry, never mind. I'll put the peanut butter away. And she says, okay, this is great. I don't have to put my own peanut butter away. All I have to do is go, all right, and I can get him to put the peanut butter away. For years I put the peanut butter away. I'm sick of it. I always feel like a slave. It's a horrible experience. Finally, I get aggressive. Finally, I find within myself the aggression to finally confront her again. Can't you put your own peanut butter away? I'm sick of it. And she comes back, well, of course I can put my peanut butter away, but you said you would do it. And then I become passive. I slip back over I'm sorry I said that. And I become passive. Now what am I doing? I'm teaching this very nice person little by little to become my slave master. I'm cultivating a slave master in the relationship. Over time, people who have slavery issues just don't quite feel right unless they're in the slavery position. And they cultivate a person over here who's strong and powerful to become the slave master. This very nice person more and more becomes aggressive and powerful because it's so easy to be in a relationship with a slave. You don't have to give anything to the relationship. They give everything. The peanut butter, of course, is symbolic of everything. And only the slave master never has to give anything. The slave has to give everything to the relationship. Now, the fourth issue of slavery. So I grow up and I leave that awful, horrible environment where I've been abused so much. I see people who can go and talk to their boss in a normal tone of voice and they just seem to have it all together. They know how to feel their balance and their independence. They seem like they're just well-balanced people and they're comfortable with themselves. I want that so much. I strive for it. I seek it. I go to counseling for it. I'm trying to be that kind of person. Someone comes along in my life and says, come up here and be in love with me. Let's share intimacy together and be in love. Oh, I'm going to be so happy. It's going to be wonderful. As I start to go this direction, something inside of me chokes. I want to go there, but I choke. I just don't seem to be able to open my heart up and experience this intimate connection with them. Why? You see, this place up here is a powerless place. I have no control over my sense of me. Somebody else says, you're wonderful. You're so wonderful. I want to hug you and kiss you and spend time with you, talk to you. I want to share my whole life with you. Or they can take it away and say, you're so horrible and awful, just get away from me, I don't want to have anything to do with you, and they can break my heart. I'm powerless over here. I have no control. This place over here, I'm powerless. I have no control. There is no control in my life in both of these two places. Weak and vulnerable places. For a person with slavery issues, they feel exactly the same. The difference is this place. This is mine. It was given to me as a young child when I would bump my knee and this person held me and coddled me and loved me and taught me who I am and gave me this feeling of who I am as a person. I freely give it to you to achieve intimacy because I want intimacy in my life. It makes me happy. I trust you that you will be careful with me. If you're not careful with me, I will take it back. It still belongs to me. It's still mine. I know how to take it back. But with a person with slavery issues, this doesn't belong to me. It was taken from me at a very, very young age. And I was taught to be submissive and taught to be a slave. I don't know what it feels like to own my sense of self. How do I give this to you to find intimacy? I don't know how to find it within me. And so as I start to go this direction, it feels like I'm going this direction. It feels like I'm losing what little bit I've been able to achieve of my sense of ownership of myself. And something inside of me chokes because I just can't go there because it feels like I'm going that direction. People who have issues with slavery have a very difficult time opening up and experiencing meaningful, intimate connection.